This is really a slide that I put up at great risk. Clearly, this woman is mad. None of us want to be this person. We hate people like this. That's really why I'm showing you this. So they are now the they, and we are the it. Okay? So we talk about they who have bad habits and want to die. So I want to talk to you tonight a little bit about this love, this attraction, this love and thing we have for our food, this, in fact, obsession that we have of food, which most of you may not even have thought you had until I took a whole lot of it away from you, and then suddenly you realized what passion you feel for slop chips. Some of you will get into your car in the middle of the night and drive and buy chocolates and do the most ridiculous things for tiny little bits of something nice. Oh, give me a piece, but just a little piece because I'm on a diet. So we talked about that. They really think, so at certain times of your life, you have these unnatural relationships, and they seem to make perfect sense at the time when you make the decision. But in hindsight, when you look back at the photo, probably not your best moment. So I want to talk to you about the madness that happens within and why you do go crazy about your food. Okay. So we're going to talk about this tonight, food intolerance. Now, food intolerance is an interesting topic because it's where we start to move away from the classic diets. It's where we start to move away from diets that you've done where they just told you, eat this, eat this, eat this, eat this. Follow a pattern, follow a menu plan. This is where we start to talk about what's the food actually doing to you inside. Is it making you healthy? Is it causing a reaction? Is it causing an immune system reaction? Is it making you sick? Are you overweight because you eat too much food, too long, too short, too late, or just bad food that your body is not tolerating? So foods that are making you sick. And the foods that we're going to talk about, I really wish I changed this slide changer, are the foods that you're finding are making this little decision or this change of life a little bit hard. So here's the thing about food. The thing that you're probably missing the most since you've started your program is very often the thing, and I think I've mentioned this before, is very often the problem that you've had with your diet, the reason you can't have self-control, the reason you don't feel well, is the thing that you're missing the most now. And everybody's got that thing. A lot of people put their hand up for bread. Amazingly, hey? Because bread is really quite a tasteless thing. Bread is for lazy people whose forks don't work, so they need something to get stuff from the plate to their mouths. Okay? So bread has very little function in life. It has very little nutritional value. It does nothing except that you can put lots of nice stuff on it. And a lot of people miss bread. A lot of people, interestingly enough, miss fruit. No? When you take the fruit away, suddenly it's like, oh, where'd my fruit go? Because you were actually compensating without realizing it. You weren't doing chocolate, but you were having plums and you were having peaches. Without realizing it, you were using your fruit to get your sugar supply. What is the other things that you start to miss? Alcohol is one. Some of you now need to put your hand up and lie about the fact that you miss it because maybe you didn't miss it so much. I have people who do the course, and at the end of the course they say, remember when you said I must take coffee away? Well, I didn't do it. And that's easy, and I say, that's why I'm still fat. So I'm not soft like that. You chose the wrong doctor. But coffee is a nice one. Did you all feel in the beginning you really missed that coffee? You missed that little thing in the morning. You don't know why. What about it is? You didn't think? Wat so goed is?
I stopped and I got high blood pressure now.
You need to see a better doctor than me then. So you change. Yes, you go through toxic reactions and responses. Your liver goes through really a shock when you remove the things that have been keeping you alive without even realizing it. And because of the poison that and the effect on your body, you often are eating something that's making you sick, but it's giving your body some sort of a kick. So we often know that you get a bit of a cortisol secretion when you have a coffee, adrenaline. You feel a little bit of a high. You do feel more awake. You feel good. You feel perky. You feel nice. So you keep going back for those things, even though you know they're not good for you. Chocolate, for the ladies, especially the ones with the hormone problems, really missing the chocolates or sneaking them in anyway. This is normally the case. So I want to take a little bit out, I want to differentiate between a food allergy and a food intolerance. A food allergy gives you a rash. It stops your breathing. It lowers your blood pressure. It can go into shock. You can die. You don't argue with the doctor when he says, I think you've got a nut allergy. You say, yeah, you think, because you normally are dying. So you don't eat nuts again, and nobody has to debate it with you. Don't go and read 10 books and reference it on Google to see, well, do you think I should eat nuts? When somebody nearly dies, they're very convinced that they don't have to have it anymore. And the problem with food is it doesn't kill us fast enough. So this is an allergy, no questions, no arguments. It's like diabetics who should be on insulin, no questions. Should I inject myself this every day? I don't feel like it some days. That's okay. Then you die. Okay, no, I'll do it. So a food intolerance causes a couple of symptoms. It affects the speed at which your stomach empties. It affects the speed at which your bowels empty. So diarrheas, constipations, heartburns, reflux, indigestion. I feel full for a long time after the food I eat. Burp a lot after meals. Bloating. The fermentation is the food. It doesn't digest properly. It actually starts to rot inside of your stomach. It makes gas. So foods that cause lots of gases. Cramping. This is cramping of your tummy, not necessarily anywhere else. Diarrhea, constipation, spastic colon. And these conditions, very common that people seem to really believe in. I've got spastic colon. I've got irritable bowel syndrome. My doctor told me I've got this. Very few doctors, surprisingly, recognize that nutrition is at the heart of irritable bowel syndromes. There are more scary things. One of the ways you get to know how the bowels are working is you get to do what we call a stool lineup. Now, this is something you should stick on the back of your toilet door. And then, so you know the problem is, the problem with stool is that they all look the same. Hey, have you noticed that? It's like Chinese people and stuff too. It's like, they all look the same. Because it's amazing how few people stand up and look in the toilet. Although then it's also amazing often how many do stand up and look in the toilet. So I often am amazed by the detail people can give me about it. So there's actually a chart that you can look at to decide how healthy is your stool. Can we interpret what's coming out of there, and can we use that to decide what's going on in the inside? And yes, you can. We have a very nice test for those of you that need to know. There's a test I can send away. It costs you 1,600 Rand. It's called a comprehensive stool test. And they tell me what's in there, what's it made up of, what inflammation markers can we find, what immune system reactions can we find, what bad bacteria, what good bacteria, what fungus can we find. Gives me an idea of the health of your entire colon, from your mouth to your anus. The symptoms that a lot of us feel with the intolerance, these are things you know because we call them IBS, spastic colon. Everybody knows somebody like this, or is somebody like this, or has been through phases like this. Tummy just doesn't feel nice. Headaches, nausea, bloating, stomach cramps, diarrhea, constipation, fatigue. So it's kind of a bit of a repeat of what we've been talking about. So which foods really stand out? When we want to talk about food intolerance, I'm going to go a little bit more detail now, but I'm just give you a little quick list. These are foods that in more than 60% of cases are to blame for foods that are making you sick, foods you can't digest. And it's not because always of the food itself, but sometimes because of the amount of that food that we eat, or because of the processing that's happened to that food, or the genetic modification that's happened to that food. So it's difficult to blame wheat. It feels bad to blame a loaf of innocent bread, especially the low GI, because they're like the good guys. But bread, and if you want to expand it, all your grains can cause trouble in your bowels because of the difficulty that they cause in digestion. Another huge one is dairy. And a lot of people who are in the upper sort of health circles don't believe you should be on any form of dairy ever. Based on the fact as well that even cows stop drinking their own milk after a few months. Most of us stop drinking our mother's milk after only a few months. We kind of have a natural instinctive understanding that we don't carry on with these things. But then we steal another animal's baby's food and feel awesome about it. So what's the problem with wheat? Wheat is really just the sad story of change and overproduction. So wheat became the main source of nutrition around the world. Wheat has been heavily modified to make thick stalks, high yield little seeds at the top, from which contain gluten, which has increased by over 50% from the gluten that your granny used to have in her bread. So you've all heard of gluten. Gluten is a little protein that we find in the wheat, and a lot of us have a sensitivity to this protein. which we have modified. It was always there, but we've made it extra because it makes the food last longer, it makes it cook fluffier, it makes it fresher longer, it stands nicely. That's why your bread lasts a week before it goes off. So this little bit of gluten that's in there starts to irritate us. But we also have gluten in these other grains, rye, barley, malt, and oats. So a lot of people who go off wheat think that they can go on rye as a safe alternative, or on barley, which not a lot of people eat barley. Malt is more something that you find in your beers and your fermented drinks. And then oats, which has been, if it wasn't for oats, Weight Watchers wouldn't have known what to tell you for the last 40 years. Because every good diet has suggested that you start the morning with a healthy bowl of oats. And yet oats doesn't really have much more to offer than wheat. A place that we find a lot of gluten is thickening agents or stabilizing agents. We find gluten in ice cream, we find gluten in tomato sauce. You pretty much find gluten in anything that is mixed together and then has to be sold to you looking exactly that way. So it doesn't settle out into its separate components. So it keeps a thing liquid, it keeps a thing sticky, but it keeps the molecules of that fluid all nicely mixed. So when you look for it on the shelf, it looks beautiful, just like it's going to pour onto your plate. So that's how you generally, if you're suspicious, if you're not sure, that's what you ask. Is this more than one thing in this bottle? Does it look like it's separating into those individual things? No, then it probably contains some amount of gluten. So it's all over. Gluten has a big problem because it really does irritate our intestines. It's difficult for your body to digest it. But your grains also contain these things, lectins. Now, you've never heard of these things, eh? Because you kind of think it's carbohydrates and it's stuff, but lectins inhibit the natural repair of the gut lining. So you've got a second blow. 1, your body can't digest the gluten. The protein's too big. 2, now the repair process that's supposed to happen is being slowed or retarded by the same grain. 3, phytates prevent the absorption of minerals from your gut. So now the very food you're eating that already has such little mineral and nutritional value also prevents food from being absorbed that your body does need. So let's look a bit at the dairy. So our dairy that we drink is not even close to the milk that you're supposed to be having. It's not even close to what gets milked out of the cow. And then the cow that's being milked has been treated and treated and treated with hormones. It's been fed specific foods on food lots. The milk is designed. So the farmer decides what he wants his milk to taste like, and according to that, he treats his cows. Hormones, antibiotics, and specific mixes of foods, often grains, mealies, lucerne, grasses. Very few of these cows are on the pasture. And if you've ever been to a dairy farm, just over the hill is Fairview Farm. I don't know how many of you have been there, but there you get an idea of the problem. These cows get milked 2 or 3 times a day. They yield about 60 liters of milk per cow. They can hardly walk when their udders are so full of milk. So they are kept very close to where they get milked. Then they get herded into the milking pen where they get onto a big roundabout, get hooked up to the suction pumps. The thing goes around. When it gets to the end, then they're finished. And then they can't go far because the farmer can't run out every couple of hours to call the cows in to come to get milked again. So they just walk in a little circle of life. And basically, it milked their 60 liters. They feel nice for about 2 hours, and then it all starts again. Then the milk gets treated right there with antibiotics. The cows are treated with antibiotics. Every single little drop of milk is tested as it's milked from that cow. Gets pasteurized, that's a heat treatment. It gets homogenized, that's a radiation treatment. It gets diluted, so water gets added. The cream gets removed. If you were wondering how they make 2% milk, they remove all the cream first, then they put the cream back again. So they can't remove 1.3 grams of fat, so they remove all of it. Then they give what we call skim milk. Then they add cream back to it. So it's a completely processed milk by the time we're getting it. The fat is removed in many of the cases, so you get your skim milks. So that's why I say it's a pale version of its former self. A cow probably wouldn't drink the milk that we drink. To make it worse, we put it in a box and ultra heat treat it, UHT. So it gets treated another time to become long life milk. So the long life pertains only to the milk, not to you. So it's not a promise, because I think maybe that's what you think, like, yes, see, I'm going to live to 400 after this. So the milk, not good. So you must get as close, if you want to do dairy, you've got to get as close to the natural original product as you can. And you can get this. It's called raw milk, R-A-W. It's whole milk, straight out of the cow, unprocessed, unpasteurized. Tested to be sure there's no bacteria or anything in it. Safe. Live long. The other thing in milk, so what's the problem with milk? A few problems. Many of us, up to 35% of us, can't digest the sugar in the milk called lactose. You need a specific enzyme from your pancreas to digest this milk. We don't have it. Genetically, we don't have it. South Africa, interestingly, is one of the highest countries. Us in the parts of Asia where we just haven't inherited it for some reason. 35% don't make it. Up to 60% of us have a reduced function of this lactase. There's something else in your milk, though, too. These are the proteins, casein and whey. Casein is a sticky, solid protein. It commonly causes sinusitis and asthma in children. Again, something that doctors don't acknowledge. So if you go to an asthma doctor or an allergy doctor and you say, "Doctor, is the milk bad for my child?" You probably say, "No." I know because I've stood up with other doctors and asked the question, and they said, "No, we don't believe it plays any role." But I have hundreds of patients who have improved after taking them off dairy because of this thing. And I don't think doctors know always the difference between lactose and casein and the fact that milk is more than just one thing. So the casein is a very sticky product. They use it to make glue. It's so sticky. So all your children with the tonsils, grommets, adenoids, they need to have a trial period off milk to see if they get better from it. Whey is the more watery part. You also get fat from milk. So that's important to know because when you drink cream, you're getting fat. Now, fat doesn't have the protein and it doesn't have the sugar. So that's why a lot of people who can't tolerate milk maybe can still have butter, maybe can still have cream. So that's important for you guys who are banting now because you're not sure about the milk. Now I'm telling you the story and I think, well, that sounds a little bit like me. You know, I've got allergies, my nose is always running, I've had my grommets since I was a kid and adenoids. My tummy doesn't sit nicely with milk. So now, but what about cream and butter? You might get away with it. You might get away with very fermented cheeses because the proteins are breaking down. And so the effect of them is that they're more easily digested because we have bacteria that have started that digestion process. So your body doesn't have to do all the work to digest it. So fermented products digest better. So that's how you're going to go. Old fruit cheeses, fats, that's where you're probably safe. But get rid of the watery milk. All right, let's talk about leaky gut syndrome. This is another thing you might have heard of. The problem here is the gut's just not keeping it tight anymore. The bowel becomes injured repeatedly by the food that we eat. It causes an immune system reaction that eventually starts to damage your own intestine. So that your body can't decide anymore what's inside the intestine and what's outside the intestine. In other words, exposing risk to your body. So this kind of a cloth is one of the theories. Whenever you eat a protein that's difficult to digest, it's a little bit like somebody scraping their nails down your intestine. It's causing damage as it's going through your system, which for most of us is fine because your body heals. So if you want to know who's gluten intolerant in this room, we can all put our hands up. None of us tolerate gluten. But the difference between us is some of us digest it faster than others. So if you don't have good movement through your bowels, the gluten stays there longer, hurts you longer, ferments longer, causes more inflammation of your gut and does more damage. So that in the end, your tummy, your intestines that are supposed to be a kind of a filter start to break and big things start to slip through. And your immune system can't tell anymore. Is this in the intestine? Is this in the blood? Is this an invader? Is this live? Is this dead? Is it bacterial, parasite, fungus? So you start to get sicknesses and reactions to things that aren't even a threat. It's a little bit like if a bee sits on your arm, as long as it doesn't break through your skin here, it can do nothing to you. So poison has to enter your system. So you've got two protective membranes. You've got a skin on the outside. A germ can build a little castle on your skin. If it doesn't get through into your blood, it can't make you sick. And it's the same with your intestines. While it's inside your tummy, inside your intestines, it can't make you sick. But when it breaks through, that's when your body has to react to it. And this problem we talk about is leaky gut. So this is a little bit of a picture just to sort of show you between these cells, we have damage and the body can no longer tell. So you get this barrier dysfunction and you start to develop allergies. So people who've got multiple allergies, I get sick from everything. I can't eat this. And then they also tell me over the years, I used to be able to eat this, but I can't eat it anymore. You've got to be worried that this is happening. Your bowels are just slowly but surely getting sicker and sicker and sicker. Some people have a thing called celiac disease. That's the most common, that's a well-known one that any doctor will diagnose. But this is the problem. It leads to this problem, autoimmunity. Autoimmunity means your own immune system starts to attack its own self anywhere. So diabetes can be caused by this. Your thyroid problems can be caused by this. From the food that you eat, you have a reaction by your immune system. It attacks your own thyroid. You end up with a low thyroid. So your eczemas, arthritises, often related to what you're eating. Here's another one that we don't always suspect. Check at this. ADHD. So children with hyperactivity, children that can't sleep, children that can't concentrate, that can't learn, that can't focus. Often the problem has started in their gut. They have such an overstimulation of their intestines that it affects a little thing in their body called glutathione, which keeps their brains clear. So their food makes them ADHD. It's not an accident. I think I said this right in the opening thing. It's not an accident that we live in a time when we prescribed loads of cholesterol medications, loads of antidepressants, loads of allergy medications, and loads of Ritalin. Is it weird that they all kind of are getting more and more and more? You hear about more and more people on these kinds of things. The problem might be from the food that we're eating. All of these things, arthritis, gut, if you've got these problems, you need to be wondering what you're eating. Even anxiety, even depression, all because of what's happening in your stomach. So if I've got enough time with you, the place I will start when I do a full examination, I want to know what's happening in your stomach. I think we're lazy to do the right stuff, though. People are lazy to make the decisions to change. But that's what you guys are busy doing now. So you're saving yourselves hundreds of thousands of rands of consultations by just eating better. Good for you, bad for me. So this is the deal. You have to give it up for good. But here's the problem. If you get stung by a bee, if you're allergic to a bee, it only takes one bee to kill you, because it's not the bee that kills you, it's the poison that the bee injects. But that's not what kills you, it's the body's reaction to the poison that kills you. It's such an excessive reaction, you can't survive it. So if you are intolerant to one of these things, do you know how much is bad for you? Just a little bit. The little bit that you have in your coffee and your tea, finished, too late, bad. Because your body takes time to heal after every time it gets the stuff in, if it doesn't have a long enough healing period, you're just making it worse and worse and worse, and slowly but surely you're moving backwards. So much so that when you do stop it, you don't actually feel a difference, because you're so sick already that you need to wait 4 to 6 weeks for your body to heal to actually go, you know what, I actually do feel better when I don't drink milk. But it's very slow. You got sick from it slowly, you heal from it slowly. We have things that help that go faster. We have medical shakes, medical foods that help your body to heal that gut. I've got an inflammation thing that works very well for people with inflammation disorders. I've got a product that increases that thing called glutathione. It's your natural gut protector. Works superbly well. All right, here's one more last thing. Are you ready? We're heading up towards the end. So remember the one when your doctor told you that you have too much acid, heartburn, hernia, you had the gastroscopy, he said you've got a hernia, 5 centimeter hernia, Briac, or you've had the Nissen operation, you've had the thing to stop the acid. So then he gave you something to lower it. So how many people, I don't answer, don't worry. So lots of people have had this problem. Acidity, no? Heartburn, indigestion. The doctor gives you something called Altasec, Losec, Lancap, Lanzaloc, Nexium. You've all heard of these things. At times, most of us have tried them or know somebody on them. Because what we're trying to do is get rid of the acid in the stomach. But there's a funny little trick to this problem. Your food that you're eating is causing this problem in 90% of cases. So I can heal you just by giving you pool acid. So no. So the problem with the acid in your stomach is it's very strong. It's got a pH of 2.4. That's not much weaker than this stuff that we pour into our swimming pools. So it's designed to be really strong because whenever a germ gets swallowed with your food, it dies like that in your acid. Whenever you eat tablets or meats or proteins that are thick and dense, the acid breaks them up. It's called denaturing. So a lot of digestion happens in your mouth when you chew and in your stomach when your body breaks up these proteins. So proteins must be broken up in the stomach. It's very important because remember just now we talked about gluten is a protein in bread. The protein is supposed to be broken down in your stomach. But if your body's not making the right amount of acid, that protein goes through the stomach and gets into your intestine where it causes its damage. So a lot of people that think they are gluten intolerant actually might have a problem higher up in the system with the acid in their stomach that's not breaking the protein properly. And then it just goes and causes trouble for the rest of the system. So how do you know you've got this? Well, what do you feel? You feel heartburn. You feel discomfort. You feel indigestion. I feel like when I eat, I don't eat a lot, but I feel full quickly. I burp a little bit after meals. My breath smells. I have irritable bowel symptoms. I get crampy after meals. I'm nauseous if I don't eat. I feel better when I take an antacid or Enos or Gaviscon or one of these types of tablets. So you might be the person. So what's happening is your body's really trying hard to empty the stomach out, but for some reason it can't. I'll tell you now. And so it's not that your stomach is making acid that's too strong. The problem is that your stomach is making acid that sits in the stomach for too long. And it becomes too full of this mixture of food and acid, and eventually it starts to come up, and then it does burn you in your chest somewhere. A lot of people will talk about pain in their backs as well. It's not the same as an ulcer. We're talking about reflux, food that's coming up. The joke is that all of us have it all of the time. So you can have reflux 40 times a day and not even know that it's happening. And the reason is that your body's got a very clever system. It's got two valves. It's got one on the top of your stomach and one at the bottom of your stomach. To get through this valve, it's got to pass a quality test. The food's got to be liquid enough, digested enough to get through there. But if it can't, your body just keeps making acid. Now you've got another valve on top of the stomach, but that valve just does this, opens and closes. It's not a flap. So if the food pressure gets up, it just starts to come up this valve. It's very clever. It's a way that you can get rid of stuff that you've taken in that you shouldn't. But now it's the easier valve to move up. So this one stays tight, and this one stays loose, and you end up with heartburn. So how do I fix you? Is I've got to convince the body that the stuff's ready to go through. So I want to empty your stomach. I don't want to reduce your acid. I want to empty your stomach. I want to break down your gluten and your protein so that your body can digest it properly. Now, who struggles with this problem? Check the list of people that struggle with this. The poor, I didn't even tell you about the pancreas. I'll get back to that. The most common one is older people. So as you age, this problem gets worse. That's why it sometimes helps to get somebody else to chew the food for you. Spit it in. It's really, you'll find you eat a lot less that way too. People with low thyroid functions, this starts to happen. Your stomach doesn't empty properly. People, ladies going into menopause, it's very common for my menopausal ladies to start complaining of heartburn. And stress. Now, nobody of you might know somebody who's stressed. You've probably heard about this. Google it. So it's just like when you don't sleep enough, you always feel under pressure, you're always stressed, you never sleep enough, you're half awake when you're trying to sleep, you're half asleep when you're trying to be awake, you never feel lekker. You eventually start to develop a problem with stress. And we'll talk about this in 2 or 3 weeks' time, is how your body manages stress and why it shuts this down. So you start to lose your appetite and or just feel uncomfortable. And part of the problem is the slow production of acid. Eventually, you can't digest your food properly, and you just start to get sick. I wanted to just come back to this part. Your pancreas makes enzymes that help your body to digest all the carbohydrates and the sugars that you have. But if your body doesn't have a strong enough acid response, it doesn't have a strong enough pancreas response. They work hand in hand. If you don't get that, you don't digest your food. I can help you with this. First, we try to get rid of the stress. So believe it or not, sleeping an extra hour a night might solve your heartburn. Separating your foods, the BetYaLife people that are going to just separate their carbohydrates from their fats and proteins, just by separating your meals makes the food just go down quicker. Your body doesn't have to spend so long digesting it. So the load in your stomach is reduced, the volume hopefully is reduced, the body breaks it down quicker here, gets it out of your stomach, breaks it down better there, the whole system starts working better. This condition is called hypochlorite, decreased acid production. Have you had a gastroscopy? These are the people that have to be worried. Your Nissens, you've been told you have a hiatus hernia, or you've been told you have this, Helicobacter pylori. Everybody remembers the helicopter bacteria. So this guy likes to live in an acid environment, but the odd thing about him, not as acid as my stomach. So you know what it does? It burrows into my stomach wall and starts to make ulcers in an attempt to get away from the acid. So I mean, that's a picky little parasite, eh? It's like, no, we don't like 2.4, I prefer like a 2.8. So it just starts to make holes in your stomach. And these are the people that end up with ulcers. So we actually can control this thing, but interestingly enough, it belongs in your stomach. It helps with digestion. So when a doctor tells you, I've done this test, you've got this bacteria, I'm giving you this treatment, maybe he's just killing something that was there anyway. We can't prove that it caused the problem. We know why, because we tested in a lot of people who've never had ulcers, but it's there. If you're on one of these drugs, you probably don't need your acid to be decreased. You need your acid to be increased. If I want to improve your digestion, do you know why it's important to improve your digestion? To get to your minerals, to get to your vitamins, to get your nutrients, you've got to break your food down. To get toxins and chemicals out of your body, it's got to move through your system. I need you to have good, regular bowel movements. It all starts here in your stomach, secretion of acid. It keeps your bacteria in your tummy healthy and happy. It keeps your immune system strong. This is where you got to focus. Maybe you need acid. Kind of weird, hey? So, that's a bit slow. Emptying your stomach too slowly. Here's another interesting one. If you are acidic, if you burn, but the doctor gives you a tablet to take the burning away, says, take this, you'll feel better very quickly, but you feel nothing. The problem is you might be having what we call bile reflux. That's chol. So your gallbladder that sits here is actually, instead of going forwards, the bile is coming backwards into your stomach. Do you know when that happens? We've all thrown up so many times that after a while you're just throwing up that yellow, oily liquid. That's your bile that you're starting to throw up. You finished by that time. You remember that's when it's like, Ina! And then you start eating stuff so at least you can throw up chunks again. Eh? So none of you have done that. So the thing is this, your system can flow both ways. And if the valves are not closing properly, you end up burning. So you know what bile reflux? Bile is actually alkaline. It's soapy. But remember, how many of you have put a piece of soap in your mouth? It burns. It's called an alkaline burn. It's a different kind of a burn. That's why your mom says she's going to do it if you swear. How many moms actually did it? Did you have? I know, they all think they're going to do it. Oh, yeah. So here's the thing with hernias. Your stomach is slipping up. This little muscle is called your diaphragm. It keeps your stomach in your stomach, below the diaphragm. But when it starts to slip, it can come up. That damages your valve. Now acid can just come up and down as much as it wants to. Nothing's there to keep it in anymore. So your doctor might have talked about a sliding hernia, a glybreek, of a rollbreek. These are the two valves. There's the valve on top of your stomach. It's not a valve at all. It's an open pipe that opens and closes when it feels like it's not very strong. There's the valve at the bottom. It's called the pylorus, very weak. There's the pancreas and there's the gallbladder, and they empty out into a common tube that empties into your stomach that helps your body to absorb the proteins and the fats, break down things further, absorb them into your body. If you don't have good acid, you don't have good pancreas function, you don't have good absorption of your vitamins. You know what that means? You can be eating the healthiest food you can buy, and it's worthless to you. So that's why it doesn't matter always how well you eat. What's important is what gets absorbed, not what gets eaten. Okay, so Woolies food, it doesn't really make a difference here. Very important that you understand this. We can give you enzymes to help your pancreas to digest the food, to break it down in your stomach. We can give you acid. And what we find with this is in the beginning you need 5 or 6 tablets. But as your stomach starts to heal, and as you start to get rid of unfortunately, the dependence on your Lanzaloc and your land caps and your Nexiums, because have you ever tried to stop those? Then you burn lekker. So you can't just stop it immediately because your stomach doesn't know how to fix itself now because it's gotten used to this horrible low acid, high pH, low acid environment. It's not acid enough. So we give you a tablet that replaces your body's acid until your body starts to produce its own acid again in the right amount. And I start people with as many tablets as they need. Then as they start to feel better, they start saying, oh, I've got a bit of heartburn from it. Then I tell them, take 1 tablet less. And then they stay on that for a week. They get heartburn, take 1 tablet less. And slowly but surely, I remove this and your stomach starts to work again. So you burn when your stomach starts to make enough acid and you're getting the tablets, now it's too much acid. So now I'm creating a true over-acid acid environment. That, ladies and gentlemen, you'll be happy to know, I don't know how I did that so quick, sure, is all that I have to tell you for tonight.